In a study done on memory, Ebbinghaus wanted to see how long it took for people to forget, or what the time period was like for forgetting. So his study on memory consisted of nonsense syllable words with two consonants and a vowel, words like poff or sem, some of which you use during memory games. He found that most forgetting takes place during the first 9 hours after learning, and especially after the first hour. There's a massive drop-off. He also came up with something that's called a method of savings. And this involves computing the difference between the number of repetitions needed to learn a list of items and the number of repetitions needed to relearn it after time had elapsed. So, for example, if it took you 8 repetitions to remember a list of 20 words, then 1 day later it would take you 4 repetitions to remember that same list of words, which would result in a 50% savings. His curve can be generalized for almost all learning tasks: words, sentences, stories, whatever the material. In virtually all cases, the forgetting curve shows the same strong initial drop in memory, followed by a much more moderate decrease over time. We also learned from this study that relearning is faster, so information about everything from math to psychology to rules to games is often retained for decades. Forgetting is not always complete. Decay is a gradual erosion of a memory, and it's the most common cause of short-term memory loss. This is also possible in long-term memory, particularly when the memories or information are similar. Old math equations become difficult to recall because new math equations are learned. Interference also happens and can cause memory loss. Retroactive interference was what happens when a new memory gets in the way of you remembering an older memory. So, for example, if you knew how to speak French and then tried to learn to speak Spanish, your knowledge of French would hamper your ability to learn Spanish. You might accidentally even use French words when attempting to speak in Spanish. Proactive interference is the opposite. Basically, if you knew French and later learned to speak Spanish, your knowledge of Spanish would hamper your ability to recall French. You might recall Spanish words when you're trying to speak French, or an old memory like your old phone number or a previous girlfriend's name gets in the way of remembering a newer memory like your new phone number or your new girlfriend's name. We also have induced forgetting that is caused either by a traumatic event or a physically traumatic event. Suppression is a conscious attempt to forget information. It's basically saying, I don't want to think about this now, tomorrow is a new day. You know that the event that's being forgotten, you're just simply choosing not to think about it. And a lot of people have expressed doubts about this deliberate forgetting. Repression is an unconscious attempt to forget something. This could be from past abuse or some other kind of trauma, but you don't remember whatever it is often because it was a traumatic experience. And then amnesia happens through a physical injury. Retrograde amnesia is a loss of memory or access to events that occurred or information that was learned before an injury or the onset of a disease. And retrograde amnesia is often pretty temporary. Although many injury patients regain most of their memories, few can recall the events just prior to the injury, often months or even years before the injury. As a result of the injury, a short-term memory of what happened was never transferred to long-term memory. And usually the most distant memories start to come back first. Seldom does every single memory return. Actually, there's one man, after a motorcycle accident, he believed he was 11 years old, and it took him 3 months to regain his memories. Anterograde amnesia is the loss of memory of events occurring after the injury. This is usually the result of damage to the hippocampus, and it prevents the transfer of new experiences from short-term to long-term memory. So this is the case of Dory, how she was unable to form new memories. A case study about someone called H.M. had his hippocampus removed when he was 27 years old because of epileptic seizures. And in this case, he seemed normal, but 2 years later, he still believed that he was 27. When his family moved, he couldn't remember his new address. He would also wonder why his uncle stopped visiting long after he had passed away. Each time he was told that his uncle had died, he was very upset. He could, however, though, continue to create procedural memories. So that's the subject of some ongoing testing.